Hi 7th graders. Today we're going to be working on lesson 7.1.4, Equations with Fraction and Decimal Coefficients. Make sure you have your book open and you showed your teacher your homework. The book page is 396, or if you go to the ebook, you go to lesson 7.1.4. You can play the video when you have all of your materials ready. Seven point 1.4, how can I solve it? Equations with fraction and decimal coefficients. Throughout this course, you have worked with quantities represented in multiple ways. You have seen that 12/16, 0.75, and 75% and 3/4 each represent the same portion, even though they look different. In your work with algebra tiles, you visualized and described perimeters in different ways. For example, the perimeter of the algebra tiles at the right can be described by the expressions 3x plus 2 plus x plus 1 plus x plus 1 plus x plus x, or 4x plus 2x plus 2 minus 2x units. In this lesson, you will develop strategies to solve a new type of equation, equations with coefficients that are fractions. Recall that coefficients are the numerical part of the term, such as the 5 as in 5x and the 2/3 in 2/3 x squared. So the coefficient is the number right in front of the x. That's all it means. You will choose between different strategies based on how the problem is represented, what diagram you draw, or whether you represent the situation with an equation. As you explore solving strategies today, keep these questions in mind. How can I represent it? How are the representations related? Okay, the first one we're going to do together is 739, so you can write that in your notebook. Are we there yet? The Sutton family took a trip to see the mountains in Rocky Mountain National Park. Linda and her brother Lee kept asking, "Are we there yet?" At one point, their mother answered, "No, but what I can tell you is that we have driven 100 miles, and we are about 2/5 of the way there." Linda turned to Lee and asked, "How long is this trip anyway?" They each started thinking about whether they could determine the length of the trip from the information they were given. So Linda's method, she has 100 miles is equal to 2/5, and she has a chart drawn like we've done where x is the total length of the trip in miles, and 1 represents 1 whole miles. Lee drew two similar triangles, and he knew x was the entire length of the trip, and that 100 miles is the part they've gone. So A says explain how both Linda's work and Lee's work illustrate the situation described by their mother. What does x represent in each diagram? So I just talked a little bit about that. So in Linda's, she set up a chart like we've done where you have one amount on the top being compared to another amount on the bottom. And in her situation, x is the number of total miles. So A would be x equals the number of total miles. And then if I look at Lee's work, he did the same thing. X is the total length, and 100 is the part they've gone. And he has the multiply by 2/5 here, and Linda has that 100 is equal to 2/5. So Lee's saying here, if I take x times 2/5, so that's 2/5 of x, so a part of x equals 100, and that's what the mother is saying, that it's 2/5 of the whole. So in Lee's work, x is also equal to the total number of miles. That's what we're trying to find. B says, what equation could represent this situation? Use the scale factor multiplier to represent this situation this situation in equation. Let x represent the total distance in miles. So here, I think Lee's method shows it the best. If I have x times 2/5, that gives me 100. So for this one, let me get a pen. So you're using what you know. And I know that I have to multiply 2/5. Remember, this is going in your notebook. 2/5 times x, because I'm taking 2/5 of the total. And when you multiply, that means of. So if I take 2/5 of the total miles x, I get 100. The mother is saying 2/5 of the total equals 100. So that's how you'd represent it in equation. If I take 2/5 times whatever our total miles is, I'm going to get 100, and we need to find out what that x is. C says, is the answer going to be more or less than 100 miles? Explain your thinking. I'd like you to pause the video and answer that for yourself first, and then play the video and I will help explain it. So for this one, is the answer going to be more or less than 100 miles? So if I'm taking a part of a whole and I get 100, I know that my whole has to be bigger, because to take a part of a whole and have only part of it be 100, the other part of it has to be more. So the answer should be more than 100, because if they've only gone part of the way, scroll down, there is more miles in their total distance. So hopefully that makes sense, that if part of the trip is 100 miles and they still have 3/5 left to go, that's going to equal more than 100 miles. Okay, next part, 740. So now we're actually going to get to solve the problem. Linda remarked to Lee, when I looked at my diagram, I see that the total distance is 2.5 times the distance we've driven. Do you agree? How can you add labels to Linda's diagram to show 2.5 times the distance? So for this one, if you see 2/5 is 100 miles, if I were to add another 2/5, that would also be 100 miles. So I could add both of those labels here, and I think this is the easiest way to answer this one. But then I don't have another 2/5, I only have 1/5 left. So here is a 1/5, and 1/5 is half of 2/5, so here the answer should be 50 miles. So for A, do I agree that it's 2.5 times? I would say yes, because I have one set of 2/5, two set of 2/5, plus a half of a 2/5 there. So I would say yes, it is 2.5 times the distance driven. So I have 1, 2, and then another half of the total distance they've driven so far. So B, how long is the trip? Using our labels we have, you should be able to see that I have 2/5 is 100 miles, another 2/5 is another 100 miles, plus 50 miles more, 1/5. That will give me my total number of miles, which I have 100 plus 100 is 200, plus 50 is 250. So the trip is 250 miles long. My show how you know is my diagram right here. Okay, now you're going to try some of this on your own. 1 second for my slide. All right, now you're going to finish 741 and 742 on your own, and then you're going to work through the homework 45 through 50. So you can get your homework as soon as you show your teacher that you finished 41 and 42. Good luck and have fun.